Great, great. And everybody else as well? Great. So I think now it's time for us to start. All these technical hassles, it usually takes us 10 minutes to get through, even when we are ready for. So second of the series of presentations and webinars on the TurboClick group. Welcome to everybody. This time we are presenting the Chinese experience to support local climate action. The four Ula will be the first. Ms. Ursula Becker from GIZ. She will present on local low carbon development in China. This will be followed by a presentation on know-how dissemination for local climate action by Dr. Stephen Werner. Integrated urban energy concept development will be presented. Upscaling of building renovation
Okay, I switched on the microphone again, and Ursula Becker is sitting here right next to me, but we don't see any presentation currently.
So, maybe I just start not seeing anything what is on your screen.
Erst musst du mal bestätigen, dass die dich hören, dann kannst du blind sprechen.
Yeah, but they can hear me. Okay. Can I choose this? Or?
Yes, just the X.
All right. Okay. Can I start?
Der Operateur den Hut zieht.
Yes, okay. All right. All right, right. So, welcome everybody to our introduction. Now it's on again. To our introduction on low carbon development in China.
Du musst was sagen. Can you hear us?
Can you hear us? please talk without the presentation for now. Okay, so I talk without the presentation. Welcome everybody to the low carbon development in China. We would like to present you what kind of things we learned in our policy dialogue with the National Development and Reform Commission. We had this dialogue in the framework of the ICI project, Sino-German Climate Partnership and Cooperation on Renewable Energies. Next slide. Whoever is using it.
He's controlling it. Vaishali or Lucy.
Okay, so first I'd like to introduce the general framework. The general framework, just in very brief, you can click through it. There's a national leading group to address the climate change. The national leading group is in charge of the National Climate Change Program. One main actor who is also working as a steering office, and the office for the national leading group is the NDRC, the National Development and Reform Commission, which is also our partner in the project. And they are in charge of the national low carbon and provincial city pilots, the national emissions trading scheme pilots, as well as national low carbon industrial pilots. Other players in these things, which you can see in the left side square, they are in charge of different kinds of other projects, which are also implemented on different kinds of levels together with local authorities. Next slide, please. Hello. Okay, so what is climate change in China? The national targets and the politic framework. So national level set the target to reduce their carbon emissions per unit of GDP from base level of 2005 to 2020 by 40 to 45%, and in the newly disseminated or newly issued INDCs, which have been handed into the UNFCCC at the end of June, they even came up with a statement that they will reduce the carbon emission unit per GDP until 2030 to the levels by 60 to 65%. Following these kinds of targets, there's a setup that the national climate strategy is in place, which formally until 2010 was called China's National Program on Climate Change, and since 2014 to 2020 they formulated the National Climate Change Plan. The concrete figures and the concrete measures are formalized in the National Comprehensive Implementation Plan, the so-called 5-year plans. And as you can see, they're always like the 11th 5-year plan, the 12th 5-year plan. The 13th 5-year plan is now in establishment and will be released hopefully by March 2016. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Right. What are the carbon development at local level? So I already mentioned the 12th 5-year plan, which is from 2011 to 2015. Time that there were targets set to promote low carbon development in pilots. The idea is to accelerate the development of low carbon technologies, establish low carbon product standards, labeling and certification systems, as well as establish greenhouse gas emissions statistical accounting system, and gradually establish a low carbon emissions trading market. That's also why they have formulated on national level these 7 national level emissions trading pilots. I just would like now to briefly come to the national low carbon provincial and city pilots, which are running since 2010. That's the first batch and the 7th batch, and basically until 2013, each pilot, each of the 30 provinces, municipalities or regions, in total we have 34 provinces or regions in China, at least one pilot is established. In regards to the ETS, you can see that the national ETS is scheduled to be launched in 2016. And again, next slide. Please. Can I see the next slide, please? All right, so what does it mean for the low carbon development on local level? For the local levels, there had been two major notices put in place, one in March 14 and one in February 15, both working on the low carbon community construction. The notice is a more framework notice, which is not going into details, while the guidance, it's much more detailed and actually giving also some indicator system, which means that for the overall objective, it is still to promote low carbon development on community level. There was the need to build up these construction notices because NDRC saw that the implementation of low carbon development on local level is lagging behind the plan. And that was why they issued this additional kind of notices. As you can see on the left side in the box, DRCs on all levels are required to work together in these low carbon community pilot constructions. And that's also very special because it is the actors in different local actors have to work together, and it's not only just the local DRC which is able to implement low carbon community construction on a local level. And that's also a major burden to it because usually the intergovernmental or inter-office coordination is rather bad. So if we see the procedures on the right-hand side, I'm not going into details in this, but as you can see, it gives already a clearer picture about what kind of aspects have to be tackled for the implementation at local level. If you now show me the next slide, I would like to introduce the categories which are mentioned in this low carbon pilot construction notice. It refers to newly built urban communities, to existing urban communities as communities, and therefore covers all possible aspects on local level. Key areas for action are what I would say are the normal key action areas for sufficient climate action plan, also as we know it from Germany. And side you can see that this notice already put forward a kind of evaluation index and indicator system to find out and identify in what kind of things have to be in place to actually be evaluated and regarded as a low carbon community. What kind of conclusions do we have? That's the next slide, please. We actually come to the conclusion that the political framework and the overall strategy is set, therefore basically the framework conditions are in a good shape. Still on local level the implementation is hampered, and this is basically mainly because of missing guidance and experience on how to involve the necessary stakeholders, how to communicate between different actors on local level, but also missing financial support and missing incentive mechanisms. Why should local levels now implement low carbon development? That's something which is not always put on the highest agenda in the cities, and therefore there may be the fact that they are reluctant to implement actions. What we did in our project to overcome these hurdles, this is we set up capacity development at local level to bridge the missing experiences, and we integrated low carbon measures as far as it was possible for us into instead of regarding them as something additional required to climate or for environmental protection. And the next slide will show some experiences in detail. Hello. Okay. Well, we said like we did some capacity development supported by our project. We did some training on low carbon planning and evaluation. And according to this training, 2 cities we advised developed their low carbon development plans. Both plans have been approved by the NDRC, and these cities now are national low carbon pilot cities. Stakeholders in Jiangxi, which is the province where we did most of our training activities, utilized their knowledge and drafted a notice on how to develop a low carbon community, and they disseminated this notice, or they issued this notice even before the national notice was issued, meaning that they were ahead of time, and therefore they are now also in the focal point as a kind of pilot region. And in regards to experiences on low carbon technologies and best practices, we did some activities, for example, some study tours, and had also some training courses on this. And based on that, Jiangxi provincial level established a Biomass Technology Research Center to further research the utilization of biogas and renewable energies in their municipality or in their region. Well, that's so far from my point. Not sure what comes now. Now comes Stefan. Yes, please.
Okay.
Whether anybody is listening in.
Can you still hear us? Are you with us?
Ich schreib's nicht, sag's nur.
Yeah. Oh.
Thank you, Ursula. Thank you so much for your presentation. Unfortunately, there's a little time lag by the time I change the slides and your slide. You would have to bear with us. So now we have Stefan to present know-how dissemination for local climate action. Stefan, all yours.
Okay, thank you very much. And I will talk now about how we here in China, together with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Rural Development, develop a know-how dissemination mechanism in order to enable key actors in Chinese cities to better execute local climate action. And in our case, next slide please, the policy frame also sets the agenda for our project, and Ulla already presented some framework conditions here. And to draw the attention to is now on my next slide on the lower right hand side, which is highly relevant for the building sector. This is, for example, the Green Building Action Plan and the last year released the National New Urbanization Strategy. And all in all, in China, we have very many very progressive targets and policies. But the question is, and now you can change to the next slide, and the question and the challenge is how those targets and national policies can be implemented on the local level. And on the next slide you see here the picture of our main political partner of Morholt, and he basically sees a lot of gaps here and feels that the local authorities need to be assisted how to implement national policies. And our project basically shall work on this. And for this we have the assistance of 4 Chinese implementation partners are quite special in a way because all of them have distinctive dissemination challenges dissemination channels in order to reach distinctive target groups, and all of them are engaged in either training or providing technical assistance to stakeholders in these cities. And together we join efforts to enable local key actors with the help of German know-how on energy efficiency in cities. We develop training materials and training formats based on the local needs, and we set up a trainer pool for Morholt, which shall help to effectively disseminate the information into the cities. And all those training capacities shall, at the end of the day, be embedded in existing training structures of motivation partners. Please change the slide. What we have achieved so far is that we have already developed 6 different training modules and training materials on it, and we developed we developed a Chinese trainer pool of about 30 people, which you can see here, with about 6 training for trainer seminars, and we developed training formats which are replicable for training formats in China and in Germany. Now on the next slide, I want to introduce a little bit more our training modules which we developed. They basically contain an overview about German know-how on respective topics. And those topics those contents of those topics range from policies, the standards, strategies, and financing frameworks to the main part, the technical concepts, how those technical concepts are implemented, and what worked and what didn't work so well. So the learning experience with regards to that. And you see there the list of those 6 topics, and each topic contains or consists of a textbook part, a manual for Chinese trainers, and PowerPoint presentations to get started. Those materials have already been basically finalized. We still have to coordinate some layout things, but they are ready. And the future challenge lies now in adjusting those training materials to the local situation in China, because they basically contain the German know-how. Now they need to adapt it to the Chinese situation. For example, Chinese case studies need to be integrated, and this work has to be basically done by the Chinese trainers, the Moho trainer pool, which we call it. And this can best be done through real training practice, that those materials are used in training situations and incrementally be refined and adjusted to the local situation. Please, next slide. Here you should see now a map with all the trainings which we have already conducted so far together with our partners. And the special thing about those trainings is that those training formats are basically all completely carried by our Chinese partners, except the purple point, which is for trainers seminars in Beijing, which we have as project team organized together with Moho. The others are totally and completely carried by the Chinese side. And on the last slide, next slide, you see our flyer, which we have recently finalized and which is distributed now by Moho and our 4 implementation partners, and contains basically what I just talked about, and it is distributed to the stakeholders in the cities. And my last words will be, if this know-how dissemination mechanism really proves to be sustainable, then Moho as really an effective instrument to trigger climate action on the local level.
Okay, they can hear us, so it's no problem. We can go on.
Can you hear us?
Yeah.
So I'm finished. Thank you for your attention. Now the next speaker can come, Paul. But
No, haben wir.
oh, Vaishali, our moderator, is kicked off. So shall we continue? Paul is waiting.
I think we should get a visual first. Do we have a presentation? So we go ahead without the presentation, the visual.
Ja, Sie schreiben.
Yes, please.
Okay, then I will continue. I hope we'll have the presentation for the visual support in a minute. I'm happy to introduce to you now the development of integrated city-level energy concepts, which we are conducting in the frame of the Sino-German Climate Partnership and Cooperation on Renewable Energy project. And this work is conducted together with the National Energy Administration of the People's Republic of China in support of their New Energy City program. And just a few words. This, you can already tell, we have heard the presentation on low carbon communities by Ulla. We have the support of MOHERD in the frame of the project that Stefan just presented, and we are supporting the National Energy Administration. There's a host of institutions and ministries working on climate issues in China, and sometimes more often than not, they are not coordinating very well with each other, but of course through our coordination on GIZ side we try to mitigate that. So maybe we can go to the next slide, where you can see a brief overview of the structure of our project, which has a policy component, as many projects do, where we support the political dialogue between the BMUB and the BMWI and the Chinese institutions on energy transition issues, from the promotion of renewable energies to the electricity market reform. The other two components, the capacity building and advice for selected new energy cities on the development of integrated energy concept, as well as the dialogue platform for said cities, are the projects where we deal directly with the local level and try to promote local climate action. If we could go to the next slide, please, that would be the third one of my presentation. We can see the process of city-level energy concept development and the different steps in this process, how we are aiming to apply it in the cooperation with selected pilot cities in China. This goes from the first steps, where we are looking at preparing energy concept development, setting the objectives, seeing what the city aims to do and which scope we like to look at in the framework of the energy concept, and then we have to get a better picture of the stakeholders involved and go on to the process design, which time frame, which milestones to apply for energy concept development. Also, the foundation for data acquisition and data collection will be included in this first step. Then we go on to the baseline inventory, establishing energy and emissions balances based on a sound analysis of energy demand and supply, of the energy consumption and the energy supply infrastructure in each of the pilot cities, to also going into the geographical distribution of supply and demand. This is a very cumbersome and not very easy process, even in Germany, where the data foundation is often expected to be sound, but is expected to be a real challenge here in China. After that, we're looking at the energy savings, energy efficiency, and renewable energy potentials, and developing scenarios for the future development of the energy system in a city. Based on these scenarios, the concept can be developed looking at different measures, and from measures developing an action plan, including measures for each of those mentioned sectors, from energy saving to energy efficiency to the promotion of renewables, adapted to the specific circumstances in each city. Finally, we go on to implementation, where you have to then implement how to go further from the energy concept, how to further refine measures and then go into feasibility studies, pre-feasibility studies. On the next slide, which you are likely not to see, but which I will mention anyway, we are looking at the process just in a different form of visualization, in a circular form, because once you have developed an energy concept, this is not the final step. Then the real work starts. You have to go about implementing the energy concept, setting up a mechanism for monitoring the progress of implementation is instrumental also to have some impact later on in implementation. On the next slide, I have a brief you can see a brief visualization of the main actors that have to be involved. It is essential that all the actors, the stakeholders that are necessary to be involved in the implementation of the energy concept, that they are already involved from the very beginning, from the scoping towards the energy concept development, in order to make sure that you can have something happening on the ground in the end. And on the next slide, I just want to shed a brief light on what we have done so far. We have conducted a study tour with some major stakeholders, with the NEA, our project partners. We have selected 3 Chinese pilot cities that we are going to work with. We have also signed cooperation agreements with those cities, and we are now currently finishing up on the tendering of the German consultancy services, which will be done very likely by a German renowned consortium with a lot of experience in energy concept development, and we expect to start the concrete advisory process from September on. Also, we have set a foundation for data collection and are currently working on the building up of the web-based information and dialogue platform. On the last slide, I want to just briefly highlight the outcomes that we expect to have at the end of the project, which will be in March 2017. Based on the vision that we aim to develop with the selected pilot cities for low carbon development, we will be looking at developing targets and a concrete action plan, including practical recommendations for implementation, and also a guidance for monitoring the progress and evaluating and optimizing the developed energy concepts. On the city level, we hope that through our advisory process and the work that will be going on during the energy concept development, that we can institutionalize an energy or climate protection manager to be designated responsible for this work continuing over the end of the project. Also, we hope to set a good example for including all necessary stakeholders and develop some mechanisms in that regard. In the end, this all aims to develop local capacity in our pilot cities, but also we want to summarize our experiences to develop a kind of model approach for energy concept development adapted to the Chinese circumstances. And with that, I would like to close, and I think we have one more presentation to go by Mr. Volkmar Hasse before we go into the Q&A.
And maybe Lucy, you could join and try to manage the presentations.
Yeah, hi, I'm back. I don't know if, am I audible to everybody?
Yes?
Yeah, from our end you are. Surprising.
Okay, thank you. Yes, surprising. Lucy's system has just crashed, unfortunately, and I can't be upgraded to a moderator, so I'm not able to display the slides. So there is a slight another glitch. So
Anyway,
do you want to give it a shot at?
Slides,
we do, but I don't.
Anyway.
Don't know everybody does. I don't think so.
Oh.
So what do you
So-
propose?
I propose that you can
One
try to
last
share
shot
us as
at-
moderator again, and we could try to share.
Yeah, you are moderator already,
What was she saying?
so you can share your slides.
Okay, so we
Um,
just use this one or?
Just
Yeah.
wait a second. No,
Yeah,
no, that's
so,
not
don't
working right.
click on the share. If you click on the button next to the share, the pull down menu, and from there if you click on the PowerPoint,
The
so there's an icon
Yeah.
for share and there's a pull down menu. So if you click on that pull down menu and then you open your presentation, and then if you go to the presentation and put that presentation on full screen. Yeah, there's something loading, but now you need to go to the presentation and put your presentation on full screen. So you would need to go to PowerPoint and put it on full screen.
Okay.
Yeah, it's loading. There's a time
Yeah,
lag,
we have it.
usually a few seconds.
Presentation number 4.
Okay, so it's coming. Yes, okay, great, it's here. And now if you just do a full screen to your
Okay.
presentation 4.
Ready?
this one screen.
Yes.
Okay.
The slide is still not there.
No?
Well, suppose it takes 10 seconds, as with the earlier slide, when you managed it from your end. Should be coming
Yeah,
up
exactly.
soon.
So maybe, yeah, so maybe you start and we hope the presentation catches
Yeah.
up.
Now, whoever
All
can
yours.
listen to us, I would like to invite you to remember the first presentation from Ulla, because she was providing you with the top-down view from the NDRC, from the national level, and I'm fortunate enough to show you the bottom-up view, namely the business that Ulla was talking about, that NDRC means. Actually, the people at the bottom of the pile also mean business. Now, what that means, I'm talking about, as you can see, about the low-carbon development project in the Jiangsu province of China, which just finished actually in January this year. And one of the results or one of the outcomes of this project I'm going to show you now. Firstly, the project actually is trying to build capacities in the cities of Jiangsu. That is, we gave a number of seminars that were presenting the participants with a lot of ideas what they could actually do in their cities or in their organizations to try to contribute to the 12th five-year plan. Everyone, really almost everyone anyway, everyone the NDRC can lay their hands on got a target, and the target was 20% within 5 years, regardless of when these 5 years would start. So that sounds like a lot for many, because they have no idea how they can go beyond switching off the lights in their buildings as a saving measure. So what happened, when we were giving one of these seminars, one or several of the managers of the People's Bank of China were also sitting in and listening to these ideas. And then after the seminar, they came up to us and they said, well, we are in this situation, we have to save 20% in 5 years, and we don't know really how to do it. We've asked a number of consultants, and they gave us individual solutions for changing the heating system, changing the aircon, changing this, changing that, but we're not happy. Can you help us? So we thought, according to what we were trying to deliberate in the seminars, we give them a comprehensive, holistic proposal. And we actually got together with one of our German companies who operates here also in Shanghai. It's called Energy Design. And together we visited the bank and we talked to the managers, and they were able to measure, visit all the rooms. They opened all the doors, very nice in fact. and then they presented or they prepared this holistic energy efficiency renovation concept. When we were presenting it, we were maybe lucky enough, because then not only the bank's managers were there and the Development and Reform Commission of the city of Zhenjiang, but also the National Ministry of Housing and also the National Ministry of Commerce. So there was a considerable public interest in this particular effort. And indeed, when we presented the bank with something like this is a not complete version of what was actually discussed at that time. We showed to invest so and so much money, that is the blue bar on the right side, then you can expect to have so and so much energy savings on the right side. So the energy design company could calculate that, and of course they gave some sort of a reduction index of how much that was worth every percent. Now these and other measures were then presented to the bank, and in some cases they said, oh yes, we want to do that, like photovoltaics on the roof, no problem. Photovoltaics on the southwest wall they didn't want to do. I'll show you that wall later, because they didn't want to spoil their facade. Lighting improvement was an interesting thing, because our measurements showed that the lighting available at every desk, at every working place, was way below the Chinese standard of what a working place should have. So the concept that we developed involved, first of all, an improvement in the lighting conditions, and in the first approach this meant more energy. But then through the LED lighting that was involved later, we actually still managed to have a reduction in energy consumption in spite of the fact that everybody has now plenty of light. Now the wall and roof insulation was something touchy, because again the bank building is a kind of classicistic building here in China. They didn't want to ruin their facade, but I'll show you later a slide. They managed by putting the insulation inside the rooms, which of course is possible if not so effective, and they made double windows. Again the same thing, they didn't want to spoil their facade, but they found I think kind of ingenious solution by installing double windows inside their old nice looking indeed wooden windows on the outside. So this is how the building looks like from the southwest. Quite obviously you don't want to put solar panels there, but you can find them on the top roof. And on the right side, this oval shows you the lighting conditions as we found them, and right now, I'll show you later, it's much improved, definitely. So the construction is still going on, it's not yet finished. We visited last time in March, and when it's all finished, the expected output is, conservatively speaking, 30%. Personally, I think it will be much better, but we will see. Why do I think it will be much better? You can see something that we haven't shown before, the HVAC, that's the heating, ventilation and air conditioning system in the computer room, which is quite intensive in electricity consumption, and by simply having a passive and only at times active ventilation, we can, the computer center actually saved 55% of its electricity for air conditioning, and that's quite whopping, and that probably will go beyond those 30% that we actually expect. Now this is how it looked like in March. Nice bright lights everywhere, nice installations as far as the ventilation is concerned. The interesting version here of the double window, it's not particularly beautiful, but it certainly does the trick. You can see how they tried, how they put up the panels in the inside walls of the offices. Now the conclusion, and then later on also the lessons learned. I'd go through it rather quickly. The most important thing was we did it all in close cooperation with the building owners. They had very clear ideas of what they wanted and what they didn't want, as I mentioned earlier. And through the discussion, through the deliberations, we were able to find indeed suitable solutions that they could accept in spite of their initial refusal. Now the outcome of this whole concept is they exceed their CO2 reduction goals under the 5-year plan by leaps and bounds within their budget. That is something that they find particularly spectacular, and that they will share again with other branches of the bank that are going to renovate in the future. Now, the modular basis I'm talking about here is an interesting one, because the original energy design concept provided for a step-by-step implementation over several years. We actually had a 10-year plan, and the bank could kind of decide on an information basis, on a rational basis, when they would have the money and when they would want to actually do these renovations. So they found that particularly helpful in making their decisions. Now, what this concept means, it is quite easily applicable to a wide range of other buildings. This office building being certainly one of the complex ones, with a computer center and the centralized air conditioning and so on. Now, the DRC in the province is very keen on promoting this one in other cities, but the bank itself also is doing it, because the bank has 64 branches in Jiangsu, and after some time they all will come up for renovation, and then in the course of the renovation they will implement this kind of concept. So a few lessons learned that I'd like to put forward here still is it needs to be a holistic energy concept that can distinguish us from the island solutions that other consultants are offering. Everybody goes and says, you buy that equipment, you buy this equipment, but a holistic concept where the bank can actually select what they can do and what they cannot do is basically still unavailable. Technical options for everything is available here in China and at a reasonable price, so that's not anymore a barrier. Now, Paul was saying earlier, they want to go towards the climate or energy manager in the city. Now, I feel this is exactly the role that our project played in this particular little project, and the advice is actually for the city of Zhenjiang to go and install an energy advisor. And that is something that could also be then promoted in other cities through the development and reform commissions. As I said in my beginning, at the inauguration there was the Ministry of Housing present and also the Ministry of Commerce, and both have very clearly indicated that if this project is successful, then they will very strongly promote it into other cities. So that gives you the bottom-up view of what Ulla was trying to say, the top-down. In fact, we have in China the very unique situation where at least everybody that we are working with is striving very hard to achieve these goals. And even those who are very reluctant, they are kind of sucked up into this mainstream, and hopefully they will also learn from the good examples. And with that, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, everybody. And I am very sorry, because I think because of the technical snags here and there, I just was not able to introduce everybody on the China side properly. So I would apologize for that. But now that we've heard 4 speakers now, and till everybody else from the room put forward their questions, which could be answered by all here. I have a few questions of my own, and maybe I could start with Ulla, and if you could just you did touch upon the points of the problems that the implementation is facing at the national level. What other challenges do you think have been there on the local level that the National Development and Reform Committee has been facing?
Thanks for the question, which I'm not fully actually understood, but I will try to answer it anyway. So I think in China you have the unique situation that basically you have a very centralized system. So the national level sets the policies and the strategies, and it's on the local levels and provincial levels and city levels to implement these policies. And therefore, basically implementation problems usually occur on these levels, but not on that much on the national level, because they are more setting the frameworks than implementing it right on the ground. There are some exceptions to this, which would be the national pilots, where sometimes the national level is also in charge of implementing a pilot. But usually, if they do this, they also have resources for this, and that makes it very easy. The main problem for implementation on local level is that they are told what kind of targets they have to achieve, but usually the budget for this is not allocated to the local levels. So they have to find their own budget and resources for the implementation. And often this is a major burden for them, and that also is often the major problem in the implementation on local level. So advising the local levels on how to get to resources and how to find financial support for the implementation is often a very good first step in the implementation and in the support to the local levels.
That sounds very similar to India, where we are also advising or setting the agenda at the national level and leaving the cities then to fend for themselves. But here I have a question from Eva, and she's basically asking if the developed training modules, they seem very comprehensive, and how would the municipalities outside China replicate them?
Sorry, we are not sure to whom the question is.
Yeah, Eva, if you could. That sounds very similar to India, where we are also advising or setting the agenda at the national level and leaving the cities then to fend for themselves. But here I have a question from Eva, and the developed training modules, they seem very comprehensive, and how would the municipalities outside China replicate them?
Sorry, we are not sure to whom the question is.
Yeah, Eva, if you could.
And we can't see it, that's why we are confused at the moment.
Okay, no problem. So I will just read the question out. What she's saying is the developed training modules seem very comprehensive, though the policy framework in Chinese cities is quite different from those in other countries. Do you think it would be where did it go? Do you think it would be replicable for municipalities outside of China? In what way could they make use of it?
Of course, because what we compiled there in those training materials is basically German know-how and German experiences to increase energy efficiency in cities. And what the Chinese do now with it, they regard it as a discussion input, and they discuss then what they can do text with those German experiences. And of course it is not the situation in China is different, but it triggers a discussion, and some mistakes might be able to be bridged or avoided through those inputs. And the same counts the same way for other countries, I believe.
And maybe to add on this, I mean, we now heard in 3 presentations that we found it very helpful to follow this German idea of a climate manager, maybe climate manager or energy manager or energy advisor. I mean, it doesn't matter, but this person would be the person who is communicating between different stakeholders on the respective levels, and that he is bringing together the key persons, finding sources for financing, but also finding persons who can advise on holistic approaches and energy concepts. And he is the key person steering the whole process. And because he's mainly responsible for it, he also has sufficient time for that. Mm-hmm. And I think that would be a model which is replicable in other countries as well.
I would like to complement one aspect on that. What we often hear of our participants of trainings and our Chinese trainers themselves is that what they learned out of those German experiences and German materials is that we do, before implementing a measure, a very, very, very elaborate analysis of the situation, and try to develop out of this analysis a comprehensive concept which suits the local situation. And this is coming often, usually, is coming too short in Chinese planning processes. There the planning is very quickly and the people want to start right away with implementation, but the assessment and the analysis before it is very crucial, and that's they see in the German experiences.
Okay, that sounds really comprehensive, and hoping that things move on. As there, I don't see any other question coming up, but there's one question to Paul, as unfortunately I was going in and out of the presentations. What is the key message from your work under the core project? Because as I could see from the presentation, you are still your work is still in progress, and you are expecting certain outcomes at the end of it. How long is this project duration?
Okay. The project is running till March 2017, not 13. That would be going back to the past. But yes, so we are still now in the beginning of this process to develop energy concepts together with our pilot cities. So it's a bit early to draw conclusions and lessons learned, but I think we expect that in a year, towards the end of next year, we will finish up on the energy concept development, and then we'll have those lessons learned available. But I can only at this point also support what has been said before. What's the main challenge here in China seems to be the national level support for measures on the local level, and we have seen in Germany that with the National Climate Initiative, a lot of programs and funding to partially offset the cost for personnel or for energy concept development or similar things. This helps to leverage a whole lot of funds from municipalities, but also from other players, from private sector and industry. And I think this is something which we can already take away, and we are already trying to work with our ministerial partners here in China to raise awareness for this and address this challenge.
Okay, thank you so much. I think this sounds very interesting. Teresa has a question. Yes, Teresa.
Yes, hello everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I have two questions.
Yes.
The first question is, I think, for Mrs. Becker, the first presenter. She was talking about a notice on developing low-carbon community demonstrations in Jiangxi province. Would it be possible that Lucy sent this notice to everybody to get along with the presentations? And second question for
Sure, I
Stefan,
mean,
is a sort of checklist
Yeah.
or? And the second question
okay,
is
for
for
the first,
Sure, sorry.
Sorry,
we
sorry.
got the questions. We got the questions. So,
Yeah,
to the
ma-
first
maybe it's
question, yes, of course you can have this. We made English translation of it, and we also already provided it to you and Lucy, by Charlie and you, Lucy. So feel free to disseminate it. It's not an official translation, but it may be still helpful in case you want to. Or you want to have this on Jiangxi, or you want to have it for the national level?
For the national level, and in English would be great.
For national level we sent already. The Jiangxi we didn't have the translation, but for the national level we sent already, so you can have it. We will provide it to you.
Okay, thank you very much. And my second question is for Stefan. Stefan, you were talking about the next steps for these trainings, and you were talking about the integration of Chinese case studies into the available materials. Do you think it's going to be very difficult or not so difficult to get good Chinese case studies? And are there already some case studies that could be also defined as a sort of Chinese good practices, as a sort of positive reinforcement for the Chinese officials?
Of course, on different, there are plenty of Chinese case studies with different qualities for every topic, a little bit different. And what happens now already when the trainers start to really apply those training materials and start to design their own training sessions, they feel that they have to refer to Chinese example to make themselves understood by other people. So by now conducting trainings, they add gradually their own materials to the materials which we developed, and that will be the this process we can during the rest of the time of the project accompany with our possibilities. And yes, of course, they all have quite a number of good case studies. The more comprehensive the cases are, the less very convincing examples exist. But still, if something is not totally perfect, you can still learn from it and discuss application problems.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Teresa. With this, would there be any other questions from anybody else? No, I don't think there are any more questions. So, then may I take the opportunity to thank all of you for taking such pains and for sticking to the time. When we started, we were really wondering, four presentations, will we be able to finish on time? But I must really compliment you. Not only did you stick to time in spite of all the hitches and all the technical glitches that we had. I think we got 4 very, very good presentations, and me personally, I really learned a lot, and look forward to maybe more webinars of this kind. I would just take this opportunity also to announce the next webinar that we have. Lucy, could you? Can you
Yes.
say something? Yeah. So the next webinar will be on
we are still defining the topic or the title, but the
I don't
topic
think-
will be about flood. Can you hear me? No, you cannot hear me.
Yes,
Yes.
we can hear
Yes.
you.
Yeah, we will talk about flood
Yeah,
risk
we can-
management
can hear you.
and urban development. We will have participation of the working group of water and sanitation. We will be doing it jointly and in the second week of September, but the date will be announced in due time. In the second week of September, but you will hear from us in August about it already. Okay?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so
Thanks.
much, Lucy.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you so much, everybody, for being so patient and kind to stay on the webinar, and thank you for being with us. With that, I will say bye to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you back.
Thank you.
you.
Thanks for organizing.
Bye-bye.
Thanks to Stefan for putting so much effort in it.
Thanks to you
Thank you,
all. So bye-bye.
Not possible without Stefan. Yes. Bye-bye.
Not possible everyone without everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.